what really unfolded between the cross and the empty tomb. For centuries, the Gospels have told us that Jesus died on Friday and rose on Sunday. But what about Saturday, the silent day, that mysterious in-between moment, suspended between death and resurrection? Most of us pass over it, but not Mel Gibson. When asked about the sequel to The Passion of the Christ, Gibson remarked, "The resurrection is not just an event, it's a cosmic earthquake." He's not merely interested in depicting Jesus stepping out of the tomb. His vision goes deeper, to explore the invisible realms, the clash of light against darkness, and what those hours meant for heaven, hell, and humanity. To tell that story, Gibson leaned not only on scripture but also on the mystical visions of Katharina Emmerick, a 19th-century German nun whose vivid revelations continue to challenge theologians and inspire artists. In this video, we'll dive into the unseen drama of those 3 days. We'll walk alongside the women who laid Jesus to rest. We'll descend with Christ into the shadowy depths of Sheol. We'll witness the fear of soldiers, the silence of angels, and the moment when history itself cracked in two. If you think you already know the Easter story, think again. This is resurrection like you've never seen it. Stay with us. It was Friday, around 3 p.m. The sky looked calm, but the air felt unnaturally heavy, as though creation itself was holding its breath. On the hill of Golgotha, Jesus of Nazareth, the man who healed the sick, raised the dead, and forgave sins, was breathing his last. His body, battered and broken, hung limp on the cross. And then, summoning one final breath, he lifted his eyes to heaven and said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Those words, recorded in the Gospel of Luke, were not simply the sigh of a dying man. They were a signal, a cosmic declaration. The universe itself seemed to respond. The earth quaked, rocks split. In the temple, the great veil separating the Holy of Holies from the people tore from top to bottom. And Katharina Emmerick describes this scene with remarkable detail. She wrote that the shaking was not only physical, but deeply spiritual. Priests fell to the ground in terror. Thunder rumbled in skies that remained clear. Even Pontius Pilate, seated in his palace, felt the shift and sent soldiers to investigate, unsure whether he was facing rebellion or something far stranger. At the foot of the cross stood a Roman centurion, Longinus. He was the one who pierced Jesus' side with a spear, fulfilling ancient prophecy. But when the blood and water splashed onto his arm, something pierced deeper than his flesh. Though not a prophet, not even a believer, in that moment he glimpsed truth itself. Trembling, he whispered words that still echo, "Surely, this was the Son of God." As evening drew near, two unexpected men stepped forward. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, members of the Jewish ruling council, yet secretly followers of Jesus. Boldly, they asked Pilate for permission to bury him. When it was granted, they approached the cross with John, the beloved disciple, and an Ethiopian servant mentioned in Emmerick's visions. Together, they removed the nails from his hands and feet. Each clang echoed like a drumbeat of sorrow, and nearby stood Mary. She did not collapse. She did not scream. She simply stood silent, sorrowful, but steadfast. Emmerick described her as immovable, a pillar in the storm. They washed Jesus' body with water. They cleansed his wounds of dried blood. They anointed him with perfumes, myrrh, spikenard, sacred oils. The fragrance filled the air, not with the stench of death but with the aroma of worship. They wrapped him carefully in clean linen, not like a corpse, but like a king being prepared for coronation. Then they laid him in a fresh tomb carved from limestone beside an olive press, a quiet, hidden place. A great stone was rolled across the entrance, heavy enough to take many men to move. But Rome was not satisfied. Pilate, nervous and politically cornered, posted 16 guards to secure the tomb. They lit torches, divided the night into shifts, and took their positions. Among them, Emmerick names a commander, Abinader, who felt an unexplainable unease deep in his chest. Still, all their precautions could not stop what had already begun. Something invisible, something divine. Emmerick wrote that a delicate fragrance lingered above the tomb, sweet, subtle, perceptible only to the pure in heart. Mary sensed it, John sensed it, but the soldiers did not, because this wasn't meant for the world's eyes. It was heaven's whisper. The story isn't finished. Outwardly, all was quiet, but beyond the sealed stone, beyond the reach of Roman swords, Jesus was already moving. Not in body, but in spirit. He was heading somewhere no man had ever returned from. While Jesus' body lay silent in the tomb, his spirit was anything but still. According to ancient Christian tradition and the visions of Katharina Emmerick, Christ descended into the very heart of existence, the realm of the dead, not as a wandering ghost but as a sovereign king. In Jewish thought, this place was called Sheol. It wasn't the hell of eternal damnation we imagine today. It was more like a vast waiting place, a shadowy realm where both the righteous and the unrighteous remained until judgment. Even the faithful of old, Adam, Eve, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David were there, waiting for a promise they had trusted but had not yet seen fulfilled. And then, suddenly, light split the darkness. Emmerick describes Christ's descent like lightning, majestic, unstoppable. He didn't knock. He didn't ask permission. He entered with authority, the authority of the one who holds the keys of life and death itself. In Sheol, the righteous stirred. Adam and Eve felt shame dissolve like frost under the sun. Noah, who once waited for the ark to touch dry ground, now sensed that the true new world had arrived. Abraham's faith at last found its destination. Moses no longer needed stone tablets, because the law itself stood before him alive. And David, his soul sang again, but not all welcomed him. The ancient powers of darkness rose to resist, the spirits who had fed on fear, who had deceived and bound humanity for centuries. They hissed, they twisted truth, they tried to veil themselves in shadows. But how do you lie when truth himself walks into the room? In Emmerick's vision, Christ didn't need violence. His very presence was enough. Darkness melted like fog in sunlight. Lies evaporated in the blaze of reality. No sword was drawn. No scream was heard. Only unshakable, radiant authority filling the depths. One by one, the just began to awaken. They rose as if from deep sleep, eyes wide, spirits rekindled. They didn't need an introduction. They knew him instantly, not by name but by presence. Every promise they had believed, every hope they had carried, was standing before them in living light. And then came the Exodus. Jesus, still shining with divine radiance, led them out. Emmerick insists this wasn't mere symbol, it was real. A triumphant procession, the righteous leaving captivity behind. It was like a general marching his liberated people out of enemy territory. For the first time since the fall, the gates of heaven opened wide. Angels descended, greeting the redeemed, guiding them upward to glory. It wasn't a performance for the world. It wasn't thunder or spectacle. It was intimate, eternal, utterly real in the unseen realm. And this was the turning point. Most stories rush from crucifixion to resurrection. Most films cut straight from cross to empty tomb. But here, in the hidden hours in between, the great reversal began. Mel Gibson himself has hinted at this mystery in interviews, calling it the most important 3 days in human history. Because while the world above mourned a lifeless Messiah, below, the Messiah was breaking chains and liberating creation itself. This is why the Apostles' Creed echoes with the words, "He descended into hell. On the third day, he rose again." But here, hell isn't the pit of torment. It is the place of waiting. And when Christ emptied it, the universe itself shifted. History gained a new center of gravity. From that moment, time would be divided not just into before and after Christ, but into before and after the resurrection. And here's the most personal part of the story. This descent wasn't just for the dead of old. It was also a picture of what he does for us. He enters our darkness. He calls us by name. He leads us out of shame, doubt, fear, and death. Because resurrection isn't just about the past. It's about you. As Saturday faded and the first light of Sunday approached, the earth braced for something unimaginable. The tomb carved from stone lay under heavy guard. 16 Roman soldiers stood watch, torches flickering in the cool night air. On the surface, everything seemed calm. But beneath that silence, creation was about to erupt. Among the guards was a man named Claudius, mentioned in and Katharina Emmerick's visions. He wasn't especially religious, just another soldier on duty. But that night he felt something different. The air pressed down on him like a weight, thick and electric, as though something unseen was about to break through. And then it happened. Without warning, the silence split open. From within the sealed tomb came a light. Not the glow of fire, not the shimmer of torchlight, but a living radiance that no words could capture. Inside, the body of Jesus, bruised and torn, began to stir. Emmerick describes this moment with awe. Christ rose from the stone slab effortlessly. Gravity had no claim on him. His wounds did not bleed. They glowed, radiant with divine power. The burial cloths slipped away, untouched by human hands. They weren't torn, they weren't scattered. They were left folded neatly, intentionally, as though whispering, "I was here, now I live." Outside, the ground shook. But this was no ordinary earthquake. It was as if creation itself was acknowledging its creator. The great stone sealing the tomb rolled aside, not with force or struggle, but smoothly, silently, as if time itself paused to make room for the moment. Then came the angels. 2 figures robed in dazzling white descended. Their movements were swift yet gentle, not like warriors storming a battlefield, but attendants opening the door of a sacred chamber. Claudius tried to reach for his weapon, but his body betrayed him. His arms went limp, his strength drained. Around him, the other soldiers collapsed unconscious, stunned by a power far beyond human comprehension. Some fell face first in the dirt. Others simply froze where they stood, shadows of their bodies imprinted by the divine flash. For a brief moment, the most secure tomb on earth became the most powerless place under heaven. And then he stepped out. Jesus emerged, not hurried, not dramatic, but majestic. His robe shimmered with a brilliance no loom had ever woven. His very presence radiated authority, peace, and life itself. Emmerick's visions describe even the grass, the olive trees, the flowers bending toward him, not because of sunlight, but because creation recognized its maker. But he did not remain at the tomb. In an instant, he vanished, appearing miles away in a small house where his mother Mary was praying in silence. No door opened, no footsteps approached. He was simply there. He looked at her with a tender smile and spoke 3 simple words, "Mother, it is done." Mary, who had borne unspeakable grief, felt her sorrow lifted in a breath. The prophecy that a sword would pierce her heart had been fulfilled, and now removed, not by force but by peace. Not long after, another Mary approached the tomb, Mary Magdalene. She came not expecting a miracle, but searching for a body. What she found was an open tomb, absent guards, and empty linen. 2 angels appeared where Jesus' body had been. They asked her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Through her tears, she answered, "They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they laid him." Then she turned and saw a man standing behind her. She didn't recognize him at first. Through blurred eyes, he looked like a gardener. But when he spoke her name, Mary, she knew. She fell to the ground, reaching for him, but he gently stopped her. "Do not cling to me," he said, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead and tell my brothers." And just like that, the message of resurrection was set loose. Mary Magdalene ran, breathless, half laughing, half sobbing. Her words cut through the silence of dawn. "He's alive. I've seen him." Meanwhile, the disciples still hid in fear, struggling to believe. But soon, the truth would confront them face to face. Back in hiding, the disciples found Mary Magdalene's words almost impossible to believe. Some were stunned, others skeptical. Peter and John, however, couldn't sit still. They sprinted through the narrow streets of Jerusalem, past the Pool of Siloam, up the hill toward the garden tomb. John, being younger, arrived first. He stopped at the entrance, peered inside, and saw the linen cloths neatly folded. He hesitated, unsure if he should enter. Then Peter arrived, breathless, and pushed past him. Inside, he saw the same thing. Linen lying there, grave clothes perfectly arranged. Not the chaos of grave robbers, but order, intention. John stepped inside after him. In that moment, he believed, not because he understood everything, but because his heart recognized the truth. Peter wrestled with doubt, caught between grief and wonder, but his encounter would come soon enough. For the next 40 days, Jesus appeared again and again, surprising his followers in unexpected places. The Gospels record these encounters, but in Katharina Emmerick's visions add vivid detail. Moments of intimacy, recognition, and unstoppable joy. Take the walk to Emmaus. 2 disciples, Cleopas and Simon, trudged down the road, weighed down by sorrow. They talked quietly, trying to make sense of all that had happened. A stranger joined them. He asked questions. He opened the scriptures to them, explaining prophecies they had never truly grasped. But they didn't recognize him, not until he broke bread at their table. In that instant, their eyes were opened. The stranger was no stranger at all. It was Jesus. They didn't wait until morning. They ran back to Jerusalem in the dark, bursting into the room where the others were hiding. "We've seen him," they shouted. And before they could finish, he appeared right there in their midst. No door opened. No footsteps announced him. He was simply there. The disciples froze in awe. Jesus smiled, showed them his wounds, and said, "Peace be with you." It wasn't just a greeting. It was a declaration, a divine ceasefire, proof that death had lost its grip. To show he wasn't a ghost, he asked for food and ate in front of them. A simple act, but one that grounded the miracle in flesh and blood reality. Yet one disciple wasn't there, Thomas. When he returned and heard the news, he refused to believe. "Unless I see the marks in his hands and touch them myself, I will not believe," he insisted. 8 days later, Jesus came again, this time for Thomas. He looked directly at him and extended his hands. "Put your finger here. Believe." Thomas fell to his knees, overwhelmed. "My Lord and my God," he cried. Jesus answered with words that echo through the ages. "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." It was a message not just for the disciples, but for every believer in generations to come, for us. And the encounters didn't stop there. During those 40 days, Jesus visited his mother Mary. He appeared to her in quiet, in prayer, not needing many words. Their hearts spoke more deeply than language could. He visited his dear friends in Bethany, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. Martha, true to form, rushed to bring him water. Mary, who once anointed his feet with perfume, reached to touch his garment again. She didn't need proof. She already believed. Emmerick says the entire house filled with such peace that even the birds outside seemed to sing a new song. Each appearance wasn't random. Each encounter rekindled faith, restored hope, and revealed that the resurrection was not just about returning to life. It was about changing everything. At last, the time came for Jesus to leave his followers in body, but not in spirit. On a mountain in Galilee, hundreds gathered, men, women, children, all gazing at the risen Lord. Jesus stood before them, clothed not simply in white, but in radiance. His final words were a charge that would echo through history. "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. And surely, I am with you always, to the very end of the age." As he spoke, a cloud enveloped him. Slowly he rose, not with spectacle but with majesty. His feet lifted from the ground, his body ascending until he disappeared into the heavens. 2 angels appeared, saying, "Why do you stand staring at the sky? This same Jesus will return just as you saw him go." The disciples returned to Jerusalem, not in mourning, but in joy. They had seen him alive. They had touched glory. And now they waited for what he promised. 10 days later, on the Feast of Pentecost, it arrived. While the disciples, Mary, and others prayed in the upper room, a sound like rushing wind filled the space. Flames of fire appeared above their heads. But instead of consuming them, the fire empowered them. Each began to speak in languages they had never studied. Jerusalem was crowded with travelers from every nation, and suddenly every one of them heard the message in their own tongue. It was the birth of the church. Peter, once paralyzed by fear, now stood ablaze with courage. He preached the resurrection not as myth, but as reality. That day, 3,000 believed and were baptized. Emmerick's visions describe what followed as a spiritual earthquake. The name of Jesus spread like fire, healing, liberating, transforming. Peter's shadow healed the sick. An angel freed the apostles from prison without a scratch. The fire of resurrection could not be chained. The message reached Africa through the Ethiopian eunuch baptized by Philip. It reached Damascus, where Saul, once the fiercest enemy of Christians, was struck blind by a flash of divine light. 3 days later, he rose as Paul, the greatest missionary of them all. From that moment, the world was never the same. One conversion sparked another. One miracle ignited the next. The resurrection became not just a memory, but a movement, a living power that continues to transform lives. Mel Gibson once said, "The resurrection is not just an event. It is the turning point of the cosmos." And he's right, because the resurrection didn't just mean that one man walked out of a tomb. It meant life itself had changed forever. Death was broken. Hope was alive. And this isn't just history. It's an invitation. What Christ did in those hidden hours, in the tomb, in Sheol, in glory, he longs to do in every human heart. To enter your darkness, to speak your name, to lead you out of fear, shame, and despair into life everlasting. This is the story of Easter, not finished 2,000 years ago, but still alive today. If this truth stirs you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, speak it, live it, because the resurrection is not only about what Jesus did, it's about what he still does.